The study begins. The Galactic Alliance monitored space carefully. They had sensors spread across thousands of systems, watching for enemy movements, strange anomalies, and any unexpected threats. Most days were quiet, just the usual trade ships, patrol fleets, and occasional asteroid drifts. But today was different. A sudden alarm rang through the command center of Vekar Prime, one of the Alliance's most advanced observation stations. The officers on duty rushed to their consoles, eyes scanning the data in disbelief. "Commander Rethik, you need to see this," an officer said, his voice trembling. Rethik, a tall, blue-skinned Tarlak, stepped forward. He had served in the Galactic Alliance for over 300 cycles. He had seen many threats, pirates, rogue warlords, even the dreaded Zarkath Empire. But as he looked at the screen, a strange chill ran down his spine. A massive warship was approaching from deep space. Its design was unfamiliar. It was large, with thick armor plating and scars that told of many battles. The ship moved slowly but with purpose, as if it had no fear. No identification codes, no communication signals, just silence. "Is it one of ours?" Rethik asked. "No, sir. It doesn't match any known design." Rethik's eyes narrowed. "Then scan it. Find out who it belongs to." The scanning officer pressed a few buttons, and the results appeared on the screen. His face turned pale. This can't be right," he whispered. "What is it?" Rethik demanded. The officer hesitated, then spoke the words that sent fear through the entire command center. "Sir, it's human." A heavy silence fell over the room. Rethik felt his heart pound. Humans. That's impossible. Humanity had been forgotten. A minor species. Weak. Defeated. The Alliance had removed them from their records long ago. The last human colony had fallen centuries ago. And yet, here was a human warship. "How powerful is it?" Rethik asked, keeping his voice steady. The officer swallowed hard. "Its weapon systems are active. Shields at full power. And, sir, its hull is stronger than anything we've ever seen." Rethik clenched his fists. The Galactic Alliance had always believed humans were inferior. They were barely surviving before their defeat. Yet this ship, this beast of a warship, did not look like it belonged to a dying race. "Try hailing it," he ordered. The comms officer sent out a signal. "Unknown vessel, this is Commander Rethik of the Galactic Alliance. Identify yourself." They waited. No response. "Send again." Still silence. Rethik's instincts screamed at him. Something was wrong. If this ship had survived all these years, what else had humanity been hiding? "Sir, it's getting closer," the scanning officer said. "Do we prepare for an attack?" Rethik hesitated. If the humans had returned stronger, then provoking them could be a mistake. But letting them roam freely was even worse. "Raise our shields. Arm the fleet," he commanded. "If they won't talk, we'll make them stop." Just as the fleet powered up their weapons, something terrifying happened. The human warship stopped, as if it had been waiting for them to make a move. Then, for the first time, it sent a message. A deep, cold voice echoed through the speakers. "You should not have come looking for us." Rethik's blood ran cold. The study of the mysterious ship had begun, and it might be the Alliance's last mistake. Rethik stood frozen as the deep, cold voice echoed through the command center. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was crushing. Every officer in the room felt the same creeping fear. This was not how things were supposed to go. Humans were supposed to be extinct, forgotten, erased from history. And yet, their warship was here, alive, and it was speaking. The transmission ended as quickly as it had begun. The room was deathly silent. Every officer, every soldier, every analyst turned to Rethik, waiting for orders. His mind raced through possibilities. This had to be a trick. A pirate ship using old human codes. Maybe a rogue AI. There was no way that humans had survived in secret all this time. "Sir, One of the officers finally asked, voice uncertain. Rethik forced himself to stand tall. He could not let them see his hesitation. Did we trace the signal? The comms officer checked the readings and swallowed hard. It came from the ship, sir. Directly. No relays, no external sources. It's real. Rethik clenched his jaw. Open a channel again. The officer did as ordered. Unknown vessel, you are entering a restricted sector of Galactic Alliance space. Identify yourself immediately, or we will be forced to act. The message was sent. They waited. The screen showed the massive warship, still unmoving, still silent. Seconds passed. Then a full minute. Rethik was about to order another message when the scanner suddenly went wild. Sir, the warship is. Before the officer could finish, the human vessel vanished from the screen. Gasps filled the command center. Rethik's stomach twisted. Where did it go? He barked. Officers scrambled over their controls, running scans, adjusting the sensors, searching for any sign of the ship. But it was gone. Impossible, one of the analysts whispered. It's too big to disappear like that. Cloaking technology, another officer suggested. Rethik's hands clenched behind his back. The Galactic Alliance had spent centuries perfecting stealth systems, and no species, not even the secretive Giganti, had ever achieved perfect invisibility. Cloaking always left energy signatures, distortions, anything to track. But this ship, it had just vanished. A horrifying thought entered his mind. What if this wasn't cloaking? What if it had something beyond their understanding? Then, an alarm blared. Sir, the warship just reappeared. Rethik turned to the screen, expecting to see it in the same position as before. But no, it was now behind their fleet. Shockwaves rippled through the command center. It moved that fast. That's not possible, an officer cried. Rethik felt his hands go cold. The ship had not only disappeared, but it had also repositioned itself instantly. No known species had technology that advanced. It had evaded their scans, outmaneuvered their fleet, and now sat in a perfect attack position. The warship remained silent. No threats, no weapons fired, just a silent predator watching them. One of the younger officers panicked. Sir, should we open fire? Rethik didn't answer immediately. Every instinct told him that if they attacked first, it would be suicide. This ship had power they didn't understand. And if humans had one of these warships, how many more were out there? Then, another message came through. You are not ready to face us. Rethik's heart pounded. His officers were terrified. He could feel the controls slipping from his hands. This was not just a mystery anymore. This was a warning. And for the first time in his life, Rethik truly felt fear. A deep, uneasy silence filled the command center as the human warship loomed behind the fleet. Every officer, every soldier on Vekar Prime knew what this meant. They were no longer the hunters. They had become the hunted. The ship had outmaneuvered them effortlessly, disappearing and reappearing like a ghost. It had chosen to let them live. But for how long? Commander Rethik felt a cold sweat forming on his brow. His instincts screamed at him. This was not just another encounter with an unknown species. This was something far more dangerous. The voice from the warship had been calm, but there was something terrifying about it. No arrogance, no emotion, just a statement of fact. You are not ready to face us. The officers around him waited for orders, their faces pale. No one dared to speak. No one dared to act without his command. The fear in the room was suffocating. Rethik took a deep breath and straightened his posture. He could not allow this panic to spread. Status on the warship, he asked, forcing his voice to remain steady. The scanning officer's fingers trembled over his console as he responded. It's just sitting there, sir. No movement, no weapons charge, but it's still broadcasting energy signals we can't decipher. Rethik's mind raced. What were they waiting for? If this was an act of war, why had the humans not fired? If this was diplomacy, Why had they refused proper communication? It felt like a test, a game of patience. "Try hailing them again," he ordered. The comms officer hesitated, then sent out another signal. "Unknown vessel, you are in Galactic Alliance space. We demand you identify yourself and state your intentions. If you do not comply, we will consider this an act of aggression." Seconds passed, then a full minute. No response. Rethik clenched his fists. They were toying with him, testing his reaction, seeing if he would make a mistake. One of the younger officers broke the silence. "Sir, if they won't answer, we should." The warship moved. Every alarm in the command center blared as the human vessel accelerated, but it did not charge at them. It slipped past their fleet like a shadow, heading straight for Vekar Prime. "Sir, they're heading toward the station." Rethik's stomach twisted. "No, no, no. Raise planetary shields," he shouted. "Arm all orbital defense platforms. Do not let them breach our perimeter." The fleet scrambled into action. Fighters launched. Cruisers powered up their weapons. The station's planetary defense grid hummed to life, giant turrets locking onto the approaching ship. Rethik's hands tightened around the edge of his console. This was it, the moment the humans revealed their true intentions. Then, the warship stopped. It hovered just outside the station's defense range, as if it had reached its destination. No weapons were fired. No further transmissions. Just silence. Rethik felt his heart pounding. What are they doing? The tactical officer studied his console in disbelief. "They're scanning us, sir. Deep scans. They're analyzing everything. Our shield frequencies, weapon outputs, fleet positions, everything." Rethik's blood ran cold. This wasn't a battle. This was an evaluation. The humans were measuring their strength, calculating weaknesses, like a predator studying its prey before the kill. A grim realization settled over him. The warship hadn't moved to attack. It had moved to observe. They weren't ready to face humans, not because they lacked numbers or weapons, because the humans already knew how to win. "Shut down all non-essential systems," Rethik ordered. "Encrypt all data. Block every scan." The officers worked quickly, but it was too late. The human warship had already gathered what it needed. Then, just as suddenly as it arrived, it turned and left. The alarms stopped. The energy readings faded. The monstrous warship, the symbol of their worst fears, simply disappeared into the void. For several moments, no one spoke. No one moved. The station that had been on the brink of war was now left in stunned silence. An officer finally broke the quiet. "Sir, what just happened?" Rethik exhaled slowly. They were never here to fight. The words felt heavy in his mouth. He didn't want to believe them, but it was the only answer that made sense. The humans had come out of nowhere, ignored all communication. For the first time in his career, Commander Rethik felt truly powerless. The human warship had appeared like a ghost, studied them, and then vanished without a trace. It hadn't fired a single shot. It hadn't made a single demand. It had simply looked at them and then left. That was what scared him the most. If this had been a normal enemy, they would have either attacked or opened negotiations. But the humans had done neither. They had scanned his fleet, studied their defenses, and then decided they weren't worth fighting. And now, they were gone. The command center was still silent, filled with officers too afraid to speak. The weight of what had happened hung over them like a storm cloud. Finally, Rethik turned to his tactical officer. "Send a full report to High Command," he ordered. "Everything we recorded. Every energy signature, every maneuver, every transmission. They need to see this." The officer hesitated. "Sir, what do we even call this? A threat? A warning?" Rethik thought for a moment. Then he shook his head. "A message." The officer nodded and got to work, but Rethik's mind was already racing ahead. He knew how High Command would react. The Galactic Alliance had believed humans were extinct for centuries. Their destruction had been recorded in history as absolute. And yet, a human warship had just stared down the strongest fleet in the sector and walked away unchallenged. High Command would panic. They would demand explanations, strategies, countermeasures. But how did you counter something you didn't understand? Rethik turned back to the main display, watching the empty space where the warship had disappeared. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Moments later, his fears were confirmed. A deep alarm blared across the station, different from the battle alert. This one was worse. Unauthorized data breach detected. "Sir," a security officer shouted. "The warship, it wasn't just scanning us. It left something behind." Rethik's breath caught in his throat. "Explain." The officer's fingers flew across his console. "Our system is still intact, but there's a foreign data signature embedded in our network. It's not malware. It's a file." A file. The officer paled as he looked at the contents. His voice came out in a whisper. "It's a message. For you." A chill ran through Rethik's spine. He stared at the officer, put it on screen. The main display flickered for a moment. Then words appeared, written in the Galactic Alliance's primary language. The text was simple, direct, and far more terrifying than any threat could have been. "Your leaders lied to you. Humanity was never defeated. We were watching. We are still watching." The command center fell into absolute silence. No one breathed. No one moved. Then, right before their eyes, the text changed, as if something unseen had just typed the final warning. "We will return when you are ready." The screen went dark. Rethik felt his stomach tighten. He turned to his officers, who looked as pale as he felt. No one spoke the obvious truth. The humans were still out there. And the next time they came, it would not be as observers. The room felt like a vacuum, every officer trapped in silent horror as the words disappeared from the screen. "We will return when you are ready." Commander Rethik's hands tightened into fists. His breathing was controlled, but his mind was racing. The implications of this were far worse than war. The humans were alive. They were watching. And they were waiting for something. No one had seen this coming. Not High Command, not the Intelligence Division, not the greatest military minds in the Galactic Alliance. Humans were supposed to be a forgotten chapter of history, a species wiped out long ago. Yet here they were, not just alive, but in control. They had chosen when to appear. They had chosen when to leave. And now they had left a message, a warning. Rethik knew High Command would demand answers, but how could he explain something that made no sense? "Commander," one of his officers spoke cautiously, "should we attempt to remove the message from our systems?" Rethik shook his head. "No, it's not a virus. It's a statement." His voice was quiet, but firm. "And if they wanted to destroy our systems, they could have." This was deliberate. The officer swallowed hard and nodded. Then another alarm sounded, not from their systems, but from the fleet itself. "Sir," the tactical officer shouted, "the human ship is back." Every eye snapped to the main display. Sure enough, the warship had reappeared just outside sensor range. It wasn't moving toward them. It wasn't charging weapons. It was just there, watching. Rethik's heart pounded. Why? Why return? "Bring all ships to battle readiness," he ordered. "Do not fire unless ordered. I want full scans immediately." Officers scrambled to comply, but the results came quickly, and they made no sense. "Sir, the readings are strange." "What do you mean, strange?" "The ship is there, but the energy signatures aren't consistent with normal engine output. It's almost like..." The officer hesitated, then spoke the words that sent a fresh wave of dread through the command center. "It's not really there." Rethik stared at him. "Explain." The officer's hands moved rapidly over his console, bringing up raw data. "The ship appears to be in front of us, but the energy readings suggest something else. Either this isn't the real warship, or it's using technology we've never seen before. I don't even know if they're physically present. Rethic's blood ran cold. A projection. A decoy. Some kind of advanced stealth system. His mind reeled at the possibilities. If this wasn't the real warship, then where was it? Was it already inside their defenses? Had it never truly left? "Sir," another officer called out, "we're receiving another transmission." Rethic's throat tightened. "Play it." For a moment, there was nothing but static. Then a voice spoke. Calm, measured, human. "We came to see if the stories were true." Silence. Then the voice continued. They were not. Rethic felt an uneasy chill creep down his spine. What did they mean? What stories? The voice went on. "We once fought alongside giants. We stood against the darkness. We burned the stars themselves to protect what was ours." The static crackled again. "We looked at you and saw nothing." Rethic's breath caught in his throat. The words hit like a hammer. Nothing. The humans had studied their fleet, their technology, their station, and they had found them unworthy. The voice spoke one last time before the transmission cut out. "Your leaders told you we were weak. Your leaders told you we were extinct. Your leaders lied." Then, without a sound, the warship vanished once more. Gone. Not destroyed. Not in retreat. Just gone. Rethic stood frozen, the command center silent around him. A species long thought dead had just declared its presence in the most chilling way possible. And worst of all, they weren't even interested in fighting. The silence in the command center was unbearable. Every officer stood frozen, staring at the now empty space where the human warship had vanished. Again. It had come, it had spoken, and it had left behind nothing but fear. Commander Rethic felt his chest tighten. "They looked at us and saw nothing." Those words echoed in his mind like a curse. It wasn't just an insult. It was worse. It was disappointment. For centuries, the Galactic Alliance had believed humanity was nothing more than a relic of history, a species that had fought and lost, wiped from existence, long before the current civilizations had risen to power. But now, that belief had been shattered. Humans weren't extinct. They weren't hiding. They had been watching all along. And now, after finally revealing themselves, they had dismissed the entire alliance as unworthy. Rethic forced himself to move, stepping toward the main console. "Run another scan," he ordered. "Check for any trace of their energy signature, anything at all." The officers rushed to obey, fingers flying over their consoles. A tense minute passed before the lid sensor technician turned back, his face pale. "Sir, there's nothing. No residual energy. No ion trails. No gravitational disturbance. It's as if they never existed." Rethic clenched his jaw. "That's not possible. A ship of that size can't just disappear." The officer swallowed. "Sir, that's exactly what just happened. Twice." Rethic exhaled sharply, frustration boiling beneath his fear. How were they doing this? Then, a different alarm rang through the command center. Not a battle alert. Not a data breach warning. Something far worse. Unauthorized access detected. Galactic Alliance High Command Network compromised. Every officer turned in horror. "No," Rethic whispered. He turned to his security chief. "Tell me this is a mistake." The chief's hands flew over his console, but his face only grew paler. "It's not a mistake. It's them." He looked up. "Commander, the humans just breached High Command's main network." A heavy weight settled in Rethic's chest. This wasn't just a show of power anymore. The humans weren't just playing games. They were sending a message to the entire alliance. "Patch me through," Rethic said, his voice tight. "Sir." "Now." The officer nodded and tapped a few controls. A moment later, a secure channel opened to High Command. The holographic forms of the highest-ranking Galactic Alliance officials flickered into view, their faces filled with barely concealed panic. "Commander Rethic, One of them barked. "Explain this madness." Rethik took a deep breath. The human warship reappeared, sent another transmission, then vanished without a trace. He hesitated, then added, "And now, they've breached your network." One of the admirals paled. "You're saying a single human ship is responsible for this?" Rethik nodded. "Yes, and they're not attacking us. They're studying us, testing us." He hesitated, "and they don't seem impressed." The silence on the high command's end was deafening. Then suddenly, all the holo displays flickered. The entire command center dimmed. Every officer in Rethik's fleet, and every officer in high command, watched in horror as their secure network was overridden. A new message appeared on every screen, in every language used across the Galactic Alliance. "You built an empire on lies. You silenced the truth. You erased us from history." Rethik's blood ran cold. The message continued. "We are the truth you tried to bury. We are the ghosts of your past, and now we walk among you once more." Every officer in the command center felt a suffocating dread settle over them. This wasn't just an intelligence breach. This was a declaration. The text flickered, and then one last chilling sentence appeared. "The reckoning begins." Then, just like before, the screens went dark. No alarms blared, no warning sirens sounded, but everyone in the room understood what had just happened. The Galactic Alliance was no longer in control. Humanity had returned, and they weren't hiding anymore. The command center felt like a tomb. No one moved. No one spoke. The air was thick with fear, the kind that settled deep into the bones, the kind that never left. The humans had just hijacked the Galactic Alliance's most secure systems. They had spoken directly to the entire galaxy. And then, as if to prove how little the Alliance could do to stop them, they had vanished again. Commander Rethik's hands clenched into fists. His officers were waiting for him to say something, to do something. But what could he do? What could anyone do? His voice was tight when he finally spoke. "Status report. Are our systems compromised?" His chief technician hesitated before answering. "No. At least, not in the way we expected. They breached everything, but they didn't take control." He swallowed hard. "They could have. Easily. But they didn't." Rethik exhaled sharply. Then what did they do? The technician's fingers flew over his console. A moment later, his face turned pale. "Sir, you need to see this." The main display flickered, and a file appeared. It was old, very old. The metadata suggested it had been sealed for centuries, long before anyone in the room had been born. Rethik narrowed his eyes. "What is it?" The technician hesitated. "A classified war record from the extinction of humanity." A chill spread through the command center. Every officer knew the official history. Humanity had been wiped out in a brutal war. The details had always been vague, but the outcome was clear. Humans had lost. So why had the humans themselves sent this file? Rethik took a deep breath. "Open it." The screen filled with old battle reports, distorted footage, and classified documents. But the truth it revealed was devastating. The war hadn't been a fair fight. The Alliance hadn't faced a powerful, equal enemy. No, it had been a massacre. But not against the humans. Against the Alliance itself. The footage showed human fleets carving through entire armadas, their warships moving with impossible speed, their strategies outmatching everything the Alliance had thrown at them. The battles weren't even close. Then came the worst part. High Command had never won the war. They had surrendered. Humanity hadn't been defeated. They had chosen to leave. They had vanished into the void, erasing themselves from history, because they had deemed the Alliance unworthy of their presence. And now, after centuries of watching, they had returned. Rethik felt sick. All his life, he had believed in the power of the Alliance. He had served in its fleet with pride, believing they were the greatest force in the galaxy. But the truth was far worse than a lie. The Alliance wasn't the galaxy's strongest power. It was a conquered territory, left behind because its rulers were seen as insignificant. The humans had spoken the truth. We looked at you and saw nothing. A new message suddenly appeared on the screen. One last test remains. Rethic's breath caught. What? What does that mean? Before anyone could answer, the alarms blared. The warship was back. But this time, it wasn't alone. Hundreds of human vessels materialized from nowhere, their designs ancient yet terrifyingly advanced. Their formations were perfect, their movements flawless. The bridge filled with panicked voices. Sir, they just appeared inside our defense perimeter. They bypassed every early warning system. Sir, they're transmitting something. Just 2 words. Rethic forced himself to look at the message. Prove yourselves. A cold weight settled in his chest. The humans weren't here to attack. They weren't here to negotiate. They were testing the Alliance. And if the Alliance failed this test, Rethic had no doubt about what would happen next. He turned to his officers, his voice firm. All ships, battle stations, do not fire unless provoked. We do not start this fight. His officers scrambled into action, but there was no escaping the truth. Humanity had returned, and this time, they weren't leaving.